Let's cross now over to Kenya, where members of parliament have voted overwhelmingly in favor of removing the country's deputy president over accusations of corruption. Lawmakers also accuse Rigathi Gachagua of practicing ethnically divisive politics and undermining the government. Mr. Gachagua denies any wrongdoing in a role that follows his recent fallout with President William Ruto. On Tuesday evening, Speaker Moses Wentagula announced that 281 members of parliament adopted an 11-charge impeachment motion with 44 MPs voting against and 1 abstaining. It means Mr. Gachagua has become the first Kenya deputy president to be impeached by the National Assembly. The country's Senate will decide if he gets ousted. Political tensions have been running high in the East African country since June, when deadly demonstrations erupted over unpopular tax hikes, exposing a deep rift between President Ruto and Mr. Gachagua. In West Africa, Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima has called for unity among countries to address the various democratic challenges facing the region. He was speaking at the launch of a $20 million West Africa Democracy Fund by international civil society groups to strengthen democracy across the region. Joke Adisa has more.
A meeting of minds as leading international non-governmental organizations, including the MacArthur Foundation, Luminate, and Open Society Foundations, initiate a $20 million fund to address the problems facing West Africa. The $20 million fund will, over a period of 3 years, support activities to increase citizens' engagement with democratic and political transitions in the respective countries. Nigeria's Vice President, represented by the Special Advisor on Special Duties, speaks on what he calls the baptism of fire received by President Bola Tinubu during the military takeover in Niger. The Vice President says the region must unite to address its many problems.
Many times such vices as corruption, nepotism, inefficiency, and socio-economic difficulties erode the trust and confidence of the people in democracy. So it is incumbent upon us, both in government and the elites in the wider society, to make sure that we do the right thing.
The Commissioner of Political Affairs, Peace and Security of ECOWAS, Abdel Fattah Musa, says it's important to celebrate the successes achieved while paying collective attention to the problems.
The place of women in our imaginaries of the future, but an acceptance that the bifurcation we have seen historically of two publics, where there is the urban Africa and the rural Africa, which is often neglected, cannot continue to be sustained without imperiling democracy.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tuga, stressed the need to fund and build institutions for prosperity. Mr. Tuga says democratic institutions in the region are too weak to stand up against strong leaders.
These institutions need to be strong, so much so that no matter how strong a leader is, you cannot alter, you cannot perverse the cause of justice for those institutions.
The Shehu Musa Yaradua Foundation, Ford Foundation, and other partners say despite a general preference for democracy among citizens, many have grown disillusioned with its practice. Notable civil society groups in the country are also part of the launch. Joke Adisa, TVC News, Abuja.
The Nigeria Movement for the Liberation of Western Sahara has welcomed the October 4 European Court of Justice judgment, finding European countries guilty of violating the sovereignty of Western Sahara. In the rulings, the court held that the European countries' agreements with Morocco to exploit the fisheries, agriculture, and natural resources of Western Sahara are illegal. The EJC President Quinn Lennox, presiding over a 7-judge panel, ordered that all such agreements without the consent of the Western Sahara people, as led by the Polisario movement, must cease within a year. The group in a statement commended the European Court of Justice for standing by the truth and advancing social justice, while urging the European countries and the European Commission to obey this final judgment of their own court by withdrawing from all Sahrawi territories and waters. Hurricane Milton has left a trail of destruction in Florida as it whipped up tornadoes and brought torrential rains as well as raging winds that destroyed homes and knocked out power for millions of people in the U.S. state, while the National Hurricane Center said on Thursday that the storm, which made landfall on the state's western coast hours earlier, had weakened to Category 1 hurricane. It was still hurtling through Florida with wind speeds of 150 kilometers per hour. We have more in this report.
The storm is expected to maintain hurricane strength as it crosses the Florida peninsula and emerges into the Atlantic on Thursday, forecasters said, despite it running out of steam. At least 19 tornadoes ripped across the southern part of Florida, hundreds of miles from the center of the storm as it neared land. The number of casualties is still unclear. St. Lucia County Sheriff Kate Person told local media multiple people were killed in a senior community called Spanish Lakes Country Club, located near the South Florida city of Fort Pierce. The sheriff could not confirm the number of deaths and injuries, but said emergency responders were still searching damaged homes. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis warned in a Wednesday evening news briefing that the hurricane had arrived on the state's coastline and that it was no longer possible to evacuate safely.
Will arrive either late tonight or early tomorrow morning.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration credited the La Nina weather pattern and warmer than average water temperatures for an above average Atlantic hurricane season. The overall number of hurricanes has already surpassed last year's total. While Milton is expected to do most damage in western Florida, the neighboring state of Georgia, which is reeling from last month's Hurricane Ellen, is also bracing for impact.
It's beyond ridiculous. It's so stupid.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden promised support for the affected regions. Speaking to the reporters at the White House, he also condemned falsehoods spread about the federal emergency response to Milton and Helen as un-American.
FEMA personnel risking their lives, climbing on hillside.
22-time Grand Slam champion Rafael Nadal will retire from tennis at the end of this season. The 38-year-old bingos and doubles gold and helped Spain to 4 Davis Cup titles, most recently in 2019. A grand farewell in sight for the legend. And finally on the world now, a woman was forced to flee her home after 50 to 100 raccoons surrounded it and demanded food, hounding her day and night. She told officials in Postbo, that's in the U.S. state of Washington, she started feeding a family of raccoons decades ago. That seemed harmless until the number showing up at her property rose from a handful to dozens, with some scratching at her front door and at her car. A spokesperson for Kitsap County Sheriff's Office, Kevin McCarthy, said some of those who turned up were aggressive. Footage from the Sheriff's Office showed between 50 to around 100 raccoons milling around trees outside the woman's home. Well, some visitors